Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask Adam. Ask is the acronym for Always Seek Knowledge. Whether that's in your personal life, whether that's in your business life, or whether that might be in your relationship, I invite you to always embrace this idea to always seek knowledge, to understand a little bit more about your life, about your business, and or about your partner, about relationships, people who you work with, people who you want to work with. Always seek knowledge to understand, I think helps keep you a little bit more, well, on on the edge of unlocking creativity. And that's actually the topic this week is techniques to think differently. I encourage you to do so. Now let's get on with the show. Unlocking creativity, techniques to think differently. See, creativity isn't a gift. Actually, it's kind of a gear you switch into, or at least you can if you want to. See, you're not stuck. You're just thinking inside the lines. And well, I'll share with you something interesting is creativity begins when or where permission meets curiosity. So when you give yourself the ability to be curious, such as always seeking knowledge, I think that's where the curiosity begins. And you being curious to more understand about your business, maybe about your personal life, maybe about your friends or your partner, about your clients. If you're making widgets, that you're open to making a better widget or a more advanced widget. When you allow yourself to be bold, to be vulnerable, and to kind of step outside of those lines, I think you'll find that's where the creativity begins. See, whether you're building a business, solving a problem, or navigating life's transitions, creativity isn't optional. It's honestly essential. It's that gear you really need to like get into. I remember it was for my birthday that it was kind of a surprise trip, honestly, from a really good friend of mine that I didn't know. I mean, even to the point where the position I was working, my boss knew, even my coworkers knew. I did not know that there was a trip lined up to go to the greatest playground in the world, or supposed playground of the world, known as Las Vegas, for my birthday. It was a transitioning point in my life. I say I appreciate it now because I appreciated the experiences. There was a host of them. But the one I think is most fitting for this particular conversation, and I know the old adage, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But I think this is relevant. And I want to share it with you. It's relatable. By the way, it wasn't on the Vegas Strip. It was actually located in North Vegas. So we can kind of skirt the edges of whether or not it was in Vegas and that it has to stay in Vegas. Fair enough? Follow with me, please. It was a pivotal birthday in my life, and my friend gifted me with the trip to go, and they joined me. And one of the things that they knew I wanted to do and invited me to go do, and with thorough excitement, I went and did. And that was go to the north side of Vegas, to the Speedway. Where located in and around the Speedway was actually two establishments that had exotic cars. Exotic cars you could drive on a closed track. Yeah, for a certain sum of money, various cars were available. And I know there was a host of cars from Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Maseratis, Aston Martins. The list goes on of exotic cars. I want to say they even may have added a McLaren. And of course, the type or vintage of the car certainly reflected the price of usage and or short-term rental. on said enclosed track. Nonetheless, I always, from about the age of 16, actually, I think it was earlier than that, but I always marveled the Porsche. I don't know why. The Porsche was just always my favorite car. I guess it might have been probably to the vintage of my first car being a Volkswagen Beetle, and I just loved the uniqueness of the engine being in the rear, right where the rear tires were, that it was directly powering the rear tires with a gear shift that was placed just gently enough up front that the driver could touch it and adjust the gears. But man, all the power stayed in the rear of the car and drove the car where it needed to go. And so I always marveled the Porsches. And a couple of times in my life, I had the opportunity to drive one. And won't get into the weeds on that one, but on basically city streets. This was an opportunity to take a Carrera S Turbo, 997, I believe, in a closed track and take it to the limits. And I remember the first lap around was to get to know the track. The second lap around, I was getting a little bit more courage. And the third lap, out of 7 total laps around that course, was when I really started to express myself. I started to understand and learn a little bit more what the car could do. I got a feel for the track. I knew where to put the car on the track. I kind of started to know where I could find the edges of the track and utilize all of the real estate of the track. And I began to put that into the next gear. Because pretty much, the torque and drive of a car like that, I mean, 3 gears and you're doing some pretty substantial things. But when you can max out to the 6th gear and not max out, but like just tap into the 6th gear and have a vehicle up to, I think that we got up to about 174 miles an hour on the track. Finding that extra gear made the difference. Because if I stayed in the first 3 gears, quite frankly, yeah, the best I was going to do was about 80. But to get past that other mark, that required the next 2 gears and to really express myself on the track and be a little bit more proactive to be ahead of something. And that, quite frankly, is what spawned my creativity in driving, in sport driving, and allowed me again to use even more of the track and to stretch myself even more. I didn't get past the 174 mark again in those remaining laps. I was hovering north of 170, but not past 174. But it was at that moment when I got the feel of all of the steps and the motion and the momentum. And I moved forward, putting it into the next gear and just going for it. Thinking a little different than the 3 gears. And it helped me pivot to having my best lap. Now, maybe you can equate that to rebuilding your business or creating a new platform or solving a problem. And specifically, maybe even under some pressure, that you want to sometimes stretch the envelope, find your edges, if you will, and then learn to expand and be creative closer to the edges and use all of the real estate of creativity. I guess what I'm saying is, I promise in this episode, we'll explore proven techniques that will help you think in fresh, unexpected ways. Even when you feel like you're blocked, like you're kind of stuck in that 3rd gear and just can't seem to push the clutch far enough to engage into that next gear. When you're feeling blocked, I think some of the steps before us are going to help you get released. Are you ready to take this journey with me? Let's go. What blocks creativity? Well, some of it is habitual thinking. Maybe some of those neurological ruts that you're residing in. Maybe you're having this covered fear of being wrong. Maybe there's the pressure to produce instead of explore, that you have to keep going, have to keep providing, have to get something on the shelf, and that you just don't have the time for innovation. I got to share with you, the enemy of creativity isn't failure. It's almost certainty. So be certain. Be certain that you can do something, that you can put it in the next two gears, that you can put in the knowledge of the edges and to utilize all of the real estate of your market, of your racetrack, and put your vehicle, your product through the paces and get it to that higher level. Let me share with you 5 techniques to unlock creative thinking, because I know you're probably still stumbling a little bit and just saying to yourself, man, Adam, I get you. And I can see you in the car, and I could see myself in the car. Personally, it would be a Lamborghini Diablo, or maybe a Ferrari F40, or maybe an Aston Martin DB. You pick it. But you just don't think you can unlock creative thinking? Well, let's explore 5 ways that you can. And then you can meet me on the floor of debate. How about that? I like to perform the 10 idea practice. Write 10 ideas a day on any topic, quite frankly. But I mean, if you really want to be specific, maybe it can be your business, or if you're a content producer, maybe your content, or maybe 10 ideas about how to solve a specific problem in your life or in your business. I mean, I'll even go so far as to say your relationship, because I feel like any one of these can be adapted to help spark creativity and train you to be more creative. So write 10 ideas a day. This kind of helps you train your brain a little bit to produce without pressure. Again, there's no pressure. Just do this 10 ideas a day. In fact, do it for 10 days. The second step is flip the problem. Flip the problem, meaning, what if you wanted the opposite result? So say your problem is you're producing too much, nowhere to go. Well, flip the problem. What if you weren't producing enough? What would be some steps that you would go forward with to help spark producing more? And I'm sure that those steps that you're going through will give you the creativity to, well, relieve that excess inventory that you're holding right now. And I might even throw in to say, you might spark some creativity to figure out how to make even a different line of your product. Now creating not only the abundance and liquidating the abundance, but now creating scarcity with the second line. I mean, are you interested in that? You know, I think of a salesperson, for example. Instead of how do I get more clients, how would I repel clients? I mean, how would I get rid of the overstock of clients? I know that sounds blasphemous. I know for salespeople out there like, no, every client's a good client until they're not. I understand, but I'm saying, think of the opposite. Again, we're focused on creative thinking, so don't get offended by this. But I'm just saying is that when you start to think of things differently, I think that's where the creativity begins and it sparks, and that's where innovation catches fire. So how would you repel clients? Bad service, poor follow-up, not doing what you say. So do the opposite. That's how you get more clients. But see how that reverse thinking works? It's a little bit of a slight mind melt, if you will, a candle melt for your brain. It's kind of like getting you to think a little differently. I always like to say you want to do something different and get used to being uncomfortable is try taking a different ride home or a different ride to work, to your office, to your location, to a meeting. Man, if that doesn't stir a little panic in your heart, whether or not you're going to make it in the same time, I don't know what would. Especially if you're in a busy metropolitan city where traffic can back up at any time and any minute. And I entertain that challenge just to get uncomfortable, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And get the feeling of kind of having your hands tied, if you will, and get comfortable with having a little bit of constraint. Because that level of constraint is going to equal creativity, which just throws us into the next step, which is number 3. Have you ever considered just limiting your options? I mean, we're always looking for more open options and more progressive ways to do something, but what if you limited your options? What if you tied your hand behind your back? Theoretically. Then what would you have to do? I mean, challenge yourself. In fact, try to solve a problem with only 3 resources. Just 3. You can only use 3. I'm sure you have a whole bunch more, but challenge yourself to do it with only 3. And you will find that your brain is going to start acting a little bit different and starting to be a little bit more creative, almost creation on steroids. Or how about limiting yourself to how long it takes you to come up with something? Try that one on for size. And maybe, so limit yourself to, instead of half the day to come up with a solution, or maybe even half an hour. How about I give you 10 minutes and allow you to come up with a solution? I think you could be pretty creative in 10 minutes. In fact, you'd be really creative. And I would even double down to say, how about only using 3 sources in 10 minutes? Constraints equal creativity. Try it sometime. I think you'll be amazed. And don't forget, you're exercising your neural pathways to only get stronger. In fact, without even my consent, go ahead and constrain yourself to 2 resources and figure out how it does in 5 minutes. Trust me, when you work on this and you get really good and you've toned this muscle, you're going to come back to me and say, man, I broke your record. Your challenge was nothing. Of course it was. Because you've trained yourself and built your neurological muscles to be creative under those constraints. So just imagine what it is you could create if I gave you more than 10 minutes, if I gave you more than a half hour, if I gave you more than half a day. Where would the creativity flow after those constraints were in place and you built that muscle? You would be a creation machine, unstoppable. Anybody want to be that? Okay, then. Let's go to number 4. Analogically storming. Solve your problem as if it were a garden, a road trip, or even a ship. If it were a garden, how would you plant it? Would you be strategic? Would you consider which way the sun shined on it? How about a road trip? Would you take the most direct path or the scenic path? Would you want to stay on the highway and maintain speed, or would you want to see the country roads and some of the back small villages that you would pass through? Or even a ship? Are you looking for the most direct course to make the most efficiency of your travel? Many times what ships do. I mean, I recall on my yachting excursions is we would take that 3-day trip from Fort Lauderdale to basically Hilton Head, North Carolina. And it was a 3-day trip. We were out to sea, and we would get, based on the curvature of the east coast of the United States, we would get almost 200 miles offshore, as opposed to starting out at just a quarter of a mile at Fort Lauderdale when we made the left turn and headed north. And we would get 200 miles offshore that are about Georgia, South Carolina, before the East Coast would start to curve back towards our favor. But as long as we maintain straight, the land would eventually be back in front of us. So which path do you want to take as far as problem solving? So analogically, storming is certainly an option. Another thing I've enjoyed doing, you can do it too. Change your environment. Your physical space affects mental space. I mean, you could start small, go for a walk, move rooms, maybe even change your tool, go from your desktop to your laptop, challenge yourself from a laptop to a smartphone or a tablet device where you have a little bit more constraints and, well, let's just say more finger pointing. Another thing, as far as along the lines of space, and if you really want to get exotic, is go have a stay vacation somewhere. Go somewhere exotic where they have hot tubs and places to go and different scenery than what you have at your office or at your physical home. Many times that sparks creativity on a whole nother level. I can tell you that many people that create amazing things, that's exactly what they do. After they've completed something, and the jury's still out on whether it was great, they tell themselves that it was great because it's done. I'll give you an example. Movie producers, for instance, create a movie, do a bunch of shots, get everything in the can, go through editing, go through sound, kind of get it together. And this could be a 6-month process with actors, and takes, and all this stuff. And at the end of it, they wrap everything up and they will go to the Mediterranean or to the islands somewhere and stay on a yacht for 1 to 2 weeks. And well, some of that's decompressing and well-deserved decompressing. And the other side of that coin is that they're looking for their next spark of creativity. Because once the decompression is gone, which, it happens pretty quick. Once you're away from the environment you were in, well, quite frankly, you feel pretty good just being away from it. So after about a day or two of not being in the grind of that production, now they're on a yacht in the middle of somewhere. And yeah, they're having a little bit of fun. But to fill the rest of the day around that fun is usually at peace, looking over a calm sea and sparking the next idea. Maybe even reviewing some notes of stories or of story ideas. Going back to the 10, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah, they're sketching that out. 10 ideas a day for 2 weeks is part of their day. Sure, they're having fun, they're reading books, relaxing, maybe even enjoying that time with their family and seeing some exotic places on shore. Absolutely. You deserve it. You just made a killer movie that nobody knows about yet, or you made a flop. But you did put in the work, you deserve a pat on the back, and you also need to continue to be creative. And that's honestly what they do. So when you see the tabloids say that they're on a yacht somewhere, well, that's what they're doing. So don't beat them up too bad, huh? And even if they're with somebody that they're probably not supposed to be with, well, they're still being creative. So give them a break, huh? Not saying it's okay. I'm just saying people decompress in different ways and find creativity in different ways and get inspiration in different ways. So, let them have their privacy and let's not beat them up. But changing your environment is crucial to adjust your mental space. And you want to do this almost as immediately as you can once you discover that your space no longer serves you. And that's why I say start small. Maybe if you're working in your office at home, move to the living room or move to the family room. I'm not saying turn on the TV and try to work, but just be in a different space. Sometimes being in a location that has more light, like maybe a patio, being outside, just hearing nature and calming down, dialing it in a little bit. You might find creativity is sparked there. Like I mentioned with the devices, the same thing. But like I said, change also will spark the creativity that you're looking for. See, the brain pattern is a machine. Creativity happens when you interrupt patterns with novelty. So like I said, you're thinking of your 10 ideas, you jot them down on a piece of paper, then you go windsurfing or jet skiing or scuba diving or whatever. And a couple hours later, you come back and look at that list with a completely different perspective. And your brain waves are firing from this adrenaline of activity. And I don't know, maybe a shark showed up. So you're still kind of pumped and you look at this stuff and your creativity juices are flowing. Again, I'm just saying that's not what everybody does, but it's kind of what they do. You need to do that on your scale that's most adaptable to where you're at right now in your business and in your life and in your relationship to start being creative. And once you start incorporating these patterns of creativity towards your business, towards your life, and even towards your relationship, I think all those three, any one of what I teach in Ask Adam Live can be adapted because it all has to do with our neural pathways. Remember the stop technique. Interrupting things once in a while is a good thing because it allows you to get back to your creativity in a different setting. Part 3 is building creative habits. Schedule creativity like a workout. Like you go to the gym, you schedule an hour a day or what have you to do your arms and your legs and your this and your that. Schedule it. Put it on the calendar. Be regimented to show up every day solely for that creative moment. And nothing else disrupts that, by the way. That is, well, in fact, we just did the Toxic 10 episode. And it was like have 3 to 5 tasks that you do each day. That may be one of them. Keep yourself limited to 3 to 5 tasks a day and don't get overwhelmed. But schedule creativity like it's a date, like it's something you have to do. And if it's an hour that you're going to dedicate, great. Sometimes you could dedicate 2 hours. But I will throw this caveat that you do need to incorporate the stop technique in the Promoto method where you do take breaks. Those 2 hours are not solely spent being creative. 15 to 25 minutes, stand up, go do something else, come back, 15 to 25 minutes, stand up, do something, come back, 15 to 25 minutes, be creative and come back. And you're going to do this like 7 times, give or take your breaks in your 2-hour window. Schedule it and do it repetitively. Your brain is going to start looking forward to that, and it's going to have a host of creative ideas just waiting to get downloaded, waiting for that episode for you to show up for your date with your creative mind. I also invite you, keep a silly list of weird ideas. The stuff that's like, where did that come from? Or that's a silly idea. Silly today is genius tomorrow. So jot it down. Write it down on a napkin, a piece of paper, keep track of it on a spreadsheet, maybe even note the date. Hey, on this particular date, I got the notion for this weird idea. Not saying you have to act on it today, but just document that it occurred so that you can remember. Because this may be one of the things you actually revert to when you get stuck. When you're having trouble finding the 10, go to your weird list and go, oh, you know what? That doesn't sound so weird anymore. That is genius. And you're going to put that into play. It's silly how the brain works because it's going to give you things you don't need at the wrong time. And you need to work with it, right? You need to write down that funny idea, that weird idea, the obnoxious idea, the audacious big idea. Write it down because you're going to stumble upon it again, or you're going to want to stumble upon it again because, like I said, it's going to be genius. It's going to be monumental. And at the time that you're ready to see it as genius and act on it is the time that is the best time to play. And that is going to be your momentum as well. And it's going to be just this creative launch. But your brain's just throwing it out at you, and it's probably not the right time. So harness your neuroencoding. Harness your neural pathways that are building and sometimes confused harness what it's throwing at you and just collect it. Just collect it. Because you never know when you can use it at another time. I mean, I remember the idea of sharing stories. And I was kind of like, well, I don't know what I would share. And then it dawned on me in real estate that I had plenty of stories. And then I kind of wrestled with the idea that, well, can I disclose stories? Because it's kind of like some personal information. People tell me about themselves and, it helps me serve them better, but I don't have the freedom to talk about them. So I'm kind of under this non-disclosure thing. But then it struck me when I kept toying around with what I couldn't do, following ethics and silly stuff like that. And thinking opposite is that I can tell the story as a lesson learned, not speaking of the individuals, not mentioning addresses or locale, but I could tell the story of the events that happened, sharing with others not only the tale, but the results and resolution of the tale. I'll give you a quick snippet. One of them was like a couple was buying a home and, they were kind of conservative with their dollars and they really didn't want to spend too much and they didn't want a house that was going to fall apart. And so I did a story of all of these events and how I encouraged them to get a home inspection. Yeah, it's a little pricey. They're a lot more expensive now, but at the time it was even pricey then, I guess. But I encouraged them that it was money well spent. And they were reassured that the home was in good structure, and they were reassured that some things had a lifespan that they may need to change in the future. And they were willing to accept that. Usually appliances are the short-term item, not the structure itself. And I also shared with them an option that was available to them to give them extra protection. Again, at a fairly reasonable price that they could get this protection that would last for a year, known as a home warranty. And if I went to bat for them as the buyer's agent, I could probably convince the seller and the seller's agent to even give you that first one for free. That way you could save up for the second year and be able to pay for that one right out of pocket, right away, and get the discount of purchasing it for a whole year instead of monthly payment. That was the story. I remember it being in a blog in my website. I'm not sure that site's still up anymore. And it was in the Talk About Real Estate with Adam. I'm not sure about that YouTube channel either, if that's still up. I'd have to get back to that. But anyway, these were things I was sharing. But again, I was thinking backwards that gave me the idea to move forward. And the thing that was actually hanging me up didn't matter at all. Because if you notice, I didn't mention anyone's name. I didn't mention any addresses. And I certainly didn't mention even the region we were dealing in. So you certainly couldn't put any two parts of that together, except for get the gist of the story that I was helping someone out, giving them the best advice. And quite frankly, if I remember some of those broadcasts sharing that information that was also available on my website at the time that I shared with new clients actually became the tool and template of making me not only a better agent, but I was the creative agent. I was the one they went to because they're like, who thinks of doing this? You did it. That's impressive. We like you. So that being said, think different, adapt a little bit, and be open to creativity, even if it's crazy. Because you'll get insight from an unexpected source. Let's recap. Creativity is a skill you train, not a mastery that you wait for. Use tools like reversal constraint, and analogical, to think different. Think creative, not just create, but to solve. I invite you to download the Creative Moods Tracker worksheet. Use it to test one creativity technique this week and track the results. And tag at Ask Adam Live with the hashtag #UnlockCreativeFlow. When you unlock creativity, you unlock solutions. Don't wait for a light bulb. Go flip the switch. Now, I invite you to go out and to make it a great day with these new insights to launch your creative self. This has been another amazing episode of Ask Adam Live. Thank you for joining.